And welcome everybody. Welcome everyone. As Zach said, I'm Dave Wilkinson with Tableau. It's my pleasure to introduce not only our topic today, but our two speakers. Both gentlemen work at HHS in different operating divisions at HHS, at HRSA and at CMS. And both are leaders in their respective finance organizations. So today they're going to be talking about using visual analytics within the financial functions to help them, their staff, and really the whole organization better understand their financial data and make better decisions. The focus for today is how they apply these analytics in their response to COVID, and primarily through the implementation of the CARES Act. And we'll get into a lot of detail of that during the presentations. But I think really the philosophy of both organizations of an analytics first data culture, it really applies to almost any analytics workflow and use case across the government. I mean, really anywhere where you have a lot of data, you need to ask questions. So our first speaker is Joe Roach. Joe's been in the federal government for over 20 years. And even though he's on the finance side now, Joe started off, interestingly, on the technology side. He was the deputy CIO and the CIO at the HHS OIG org, and also at HRSA. And I think this is probably where Joe developed his first analytic nature. But about 7 years ago, back in 2014, Joe did transition over to the finance world. And he now serves as the director of the Division of Financial Policy, Analysis, and Control Division for the HRSA OCFO. And Joe was also just recently the lead for the program integrity team for HRSA's Office of Provider Relief. And that's a huge $175 billion COVID-19 relief program for unreimbursed expenses and for lost revenue. So in these roles, Joe uses advanced data analytics to basically dissect big data, right? He's looking to identify anomalies, do trend analysis, do root cause analysis in the spirit of A123 and risk management. And Joe also directs HRSA's robotic management automation for financial management and payment integrity. And one of the things I really like about Joe is he's very hands-on, as is Jay. So you'll see this from both gentlemen in their presentations today. But Joe leads hands-on instruction training for folks at HRSA, but also for other folks at HHS. And it's focused primarily on the increasing proficiency in data analytics. Joe also creates his own dashboard, his own visual analytics, and provides those out to his team to help them do their job. So you'll see that in the demo. And next is Jay Joshi. Jay, also with HHS. Jay is the Deputy Director for the Division of Financial Application Systems. That's in CMS's Office of Financial Management. And Jay has a wide range of responsibilities within OFM, but one of the most important is he's the Senior Technical Advisor for the HIGLAS system. And HIGLAS is CMS's financial accounting system. So Jay is truly a finance lifer. So prior to joining CMS, Jay spent the majority of 25 years experience extensively working on designing, implementing, and supporting financial accounting systems in both private and public sector organizations. He also holds a BA, a bachelor's degree in accounting, an MBA in finance, and many professional certifications like PMP and the Certified Information Security Manager. So Jay is extremely well versed in this field, and we're lucky to have both gentlemen here. So Joe, I'll kick it off to you to start.
All right, thank you very much, Dave. Very nice words, and it's super nice to be with you guys today, and to spend a little time with my colleague over at CMS, Jay. As our get to in the presentation, Jay and his team, not just the finance team, but the entire CMS family, was really a godsend to us in many ways during the pandemic when HRSA was asked immediately to help administer the provider relief program. We really leaned on CMS pretty heavy. And I really just believe, for the record, that if it wasn't for that type of good partnership and collaboration, it would have been a much tougher climb than, that it already was to begin with. So big shout out to my folks over at CMS. They know how much we respect and appreciate everything they've done for us. So I'm Joe. Dave did a great job introducing me, better than I would do myself. So we're here to talk to you a little bit about financial management, data analytics, and visualization. Hope to kind of share some of our stories, and maybe you could take away a couple nuggets that might help you in your job, or help you as you're trying to wrap your head around what it is you might do with data analytics and visualization. I sure wish I could get this header off the top, but I seem to have not figured that out. Just a little overview into HRSA. That's what the title says. You can't see it maybe. HRSA is a very interesting operating division within HHS. We've got more than 90 kind of distinct programs that provide healthcare to people that, really are, whether it's geographically, economically, medically challenged. They are, we think of ourselves as essentially like the access agency. I always think of our agency, and this is one of the reasons why so many people that work at HRSA are so passionate about the agency. We're kind of like that safety net. So think about the trapeze, people are walking across the high wire or trapeze, and you got a safety net to protect you. And really, that's a very good analogy to what HRSA does. We primarily execute or disperse money through grants and cooperative agreements. I would say that we also administer the Provider Relief Fund, which David mentioned is really a lot of money, upwards of $180 billion that are going out for, it's part of like general and targeted payments for either unreimbursed expenses attributable to coronavirus or for lost revenue attributable to coronavirus, and also the uninsured program for testing and treatment and vaccines. Every year, HRSA programs serve tens of millions of people, including really important parts of our community, whether it's the HIV/AIDS population, pregnant moms, mothers and families, and again, otherwise folks who wouldn't have access to healthcare. So just a bit about HRSA and who we are. So what I really want to talk to you about is the foundation for data analytics. And again, this is Joe at the HRSA level speaking. It doesn't always mean this is the blueprint. You have to move in this direction. This is kind of the direction that I and we and the whole organization has gone about, really kind of getting us to where we are today. And I do think of us as a relatively mature organization. But I think of it kind of like at the foundation is, you could think of it as data access or availability of data, but ultimately it's you have access to good, clean, reliable, trustworthy data. And so in our mind, I refer to this as kind of just the data collection. And for us at HRSA, and I will go into it on the next slide, we have lots of systems like everyone does. My team has responsibility for managing and operating a financial data warehouse. And of course, today's presentation is leaned on finance. So with respect to data collection, HRSA has a central repository that ingests data from all the different feeder systems. And I mean feeder systems from anything that has a footprint or an imprint on a financial transaction. It could be well before an accounting transaction is processed, but that information is vitally important to many people that are doing budget forecasting, that are trying to understand how much has been committed, waiting to see it get obligated. Many people that are hooked in performance or doing some sort of internal control auditing. Information from these feeder systems are really important when you're trying to be smart and prudent with data. So we do have this centralized way for ETLs to pull this data in. And you can see that this central spot really became important. And I just put my mouse around this statement, the PRF data sources. That's our Provider Relief Fund. That's the big program that we got for COVID funding. And we'll talk a little bit more on the next page about how we leveraged our data architecture to bring it in. Proficiency, yes. It's great to have data. It's great to have access and availability, but do you have an organization that knows how to handle it? I'd say everybody wants to be data literate. Everybody wants to be have informed data-driven decisions. And I would tell you that we very certainly have that. Over the years, I'm going to just minimize that right there. Over the years, we've established kind of like an ad hoc at first training program that was based upon what we thought would be some real important principles of just data. Forget, how you're going to analyze and make it nice with visualization, just data management, data cleansing, data formatting, really, and then progressively working upward. We'll talk about that in a little bit. That's really progressed, went from like a small little thing to like a little bit bigger across an office. And now HRSA has really made a big commitment to doing it, offering some data analytic and visualization training at an enterprise level. We have hopefully folks that are listening to today's webinar that are part of that class. I'd say I did the math in my head, and I'm thinking that we are close to upwards of 5% of the total staff population has now gone through this 12-week training. Lastly is data consumption. Last part of what I've said here is data consumption. And that's really kind of like, now you have it, you're skilled, you have access, are you using it? Like, do we really make decisions based upon the information? Are we at that point? And the answer is yes. You can always get better, and we always will challenge ourselves to do more, do it better, share better. But we've got, as an organization, some really amazing folks that do some, really impressive work with respect to having data and let that lead them or help them support decisions that need to be made. And again, my presentation will focus on the financial, really the internal facing stuff, but still really important. Okay, so kind of like a segue off of that, data collection, single secure trusted data repository, that's what you're seeing on this screen right here. And this isn't an attempt to kind of kill you with a visual. It's really just to kind of give you an idea of, as you guys probably all well know, how complicated and hard it can be at times. Everything that's got a red border, I think of it as life before COVID for me and my team. It was hard enough, really, in a way, from a data management perspective. But when we were, thrust into a new world and we were administering a provider relief program, we needed to really turn on a dime and begin to leverage kind of not just the skills, but our internal data infrastructure that we had, so that we could begin ingesting really, really important data, data that was going to help us with executing, payment validations, making sure the right people get the right amount of money, avoiding improper payments. That was essential, critical to everyone, but certainly to us. We were, steadfast in making sure we were doing it well. And honestly, again, going back to the CMS relationship, that it was really bound. We were hand in hand working with them, securely exchanging data, doing it in a proper way through data use agreements, and just phenomenal way of being able to leverage and learn from what they've already experienced in that space. And again, we have to begin ingesting new data, pulling it in from, as payments are going, being executed, all this has to come together amongst, for other purposes besides just payment integrity, analytics, and dashboards. We have to reconcile, right? We have to be able to reconcile to the penny. So this became our structure and our foundation to do it. So yes, central repository for all things payment, obligation, accounting, exclusionary. It becomes the hub, think of it, for these ETL type activities that are coming in, pulling in lots of data, lots of banking, lots of even paper check type of transactions. And ultimately, to use this to kind of take us and allow us to go to the next step, which is to make some decisions based upon this data. So before I kind of go on to, other things. I wanted to kind of show why I think it's important. One of the important steps for us, and from a data collection perspective, by having our data in a single location or having access to data that is relevant, in my world, which it could be financial, budget, and all those sorts of things. This little screenshot on the left kind of gives you an idea that our tools and our framework, our approaches allows us to reach out, grab and access this data from one location. Easier said than done. We do it. Okay. We have complexity with as everyone does with these databases and data sets, but you get good over time, and you begin to really learn, and you take advantage of your skills so that this relationships that exist, that you're able to pull in and have repeatable, consistent, accurate data. Otherwise, it's like a house of cards. It's not really worth much of anything. So good, solid joins and relationships, and being able to leverage just some of the built-in features with extracts and data source filters. Removing, helping improve your performance. Kind of maybe get rid of some extraneous information that's going to either be, it's not important or relevant to what it is you're analyzing. They got those capabilities, and for the most part, it's largely intuitive working in that environment. And I know that's probably something that most of you all are familiar with, but I thought I'd show it to you. Just to go on to data proficiency a little bit. Yes, we do now have this agency-wide training approach to improve literacy and analytic capabilities. We've got really some marvelous leadership here. We have a Center for Innovation, and they've really they've taken the baton and run. We got buy-in from our bureaus and offices to really say, all right, we have opportunities to do things in an organized, comprehensive fashion. We're going to try to move the needle in a lot of areas. One of them is data proficiency. So this 12-week training program that, it's funny, I first just did it to help onboard new staff. And then we realized, well, it's actually good for other people because now they're going to be able to work in Tableau, or they can use it to just get better at, pulling a couple different data sets together. Well, then it became pretty apparent that the benefits of this went far beyond just an office of budget finance. It became something that had value far beyond that. So this 12-week, and why is it 12? Why not 9? Why not 16? 12 is the number we landed on. We meet weekly. We have weekly assignments with weekly data sets that get distributed. It starts kind of fun and easy and light with kind of good data that's not threatening, but it helps you kind of wrap your head around it. Before you know it, we're working with real data that's data that's important to our mission that we use. So it gives people a taste of data outside of their swim lane, forces them not just to think about it from, boy, I'm a public health analyst, but now, okay, I've got to look at it from the view of an HR professional, or of a grants manager, or potentially an internal controls person. It's actually just I think a very good approach. And then ultimately it's like a progression, right? And you get to the point where you're able to join multiple data sets together, make sure the data is accurate, formatted. You do great visualizations. What I wanted to really do is give credit to a couple of our students. These are 2 student dashboards. Just amazing stuff that some of these folks can do. One is from one of our colleagues over, good friends over at CMS, the one on the right-hand side. The one on the bottom left is someone from our acquisition shop. Really just amazing. There isn't anyone can, it's almost like Cousteau from Ratatouille. Anyone can data analyze, I suppose. So it's really been good. So the data proficiency became really essential for what we're doing. I'm gonna kind of stop here our intro this, and I just have another minute or two before I'm gonna have to pass the mic over to Jay. I kind of will take you through something quick. I'll show you the real McCoy. So I'm gonna stop and I'm gonna share different screens. So just hang in there, guys. Okay. All right. Jay, when you go to present, if you could get rid of this ribbon at the top right, I'm going to get sick because I couldn't figure out how to remove it. But what I'm going to show you here is an example of something that we have here internally. It's think of it as a data analytic landing or platform, and for us, it might be office, our budget and finance related activities. It could be really financial, where you're going to come in, you want to check on availability of funds, some of the CAN level commitment tracking, UDO, whatever it is. We have dashboards and secure Tableau server published analytics that are focused on risk and enterprise risk management. As you would imagine, in a finance shop, a lot of internal controls, leveraging the data we have, right? Leverage it, let it lead us, identify where we need to concentrate efforts, and then of course, provide relief. So, I'll just walk through a little bit. We won't go, too deep, but, I'm now thinking that this is the financial management, and, you want to start to look into some of the funds availability. We have the ability to see it. Okay, we can interact. We can see what's allocated, available, unavailable. What's the rate? Where are we over the course of a year? Look at these individual days. You jump out, obviously, big days, big financial obligations, and then the opportunity to interact. Right? We could drill. Again, this is still at a high level, but this information becomes really important when you're looking at it through the lens of like a particular bureau or office, or if you're really focused at that particular obligation, this becomes the way to really dial into it. I'm going to just show you one more thing. So what we've done is, and we have a litany of dashboards. I'm going to take you, this is going to launch me into and I might have to open up and share really quick a different screen. So I apologize. Okay. And so what you have here is an example of different types of dashboards or analytics that might be in place. So for us, we have a lot of interest and a lot of work that's gone into our Provider Relief Fund. Many different ways or many different analytical platforms that we could jump into to really, find out, the answers to questions we have, to become more intelligent with how we're doing our job. Like really, one of the bigger things that we've done was create think of it as like this self-service data analytic platform, but it gives us the ability to really perform almost, any litany of types of inquiries or thoughts or, identification of things that seem anomalous, a trend, a pattern. It was through years, and I'm, on the fly connecting through the Wi-Fi or through my VPN. So I apologize that it's a little bit of a slow load, but you can see the types of information. And all of this is internal facing, none of which I can share today with you all. This is really just intended to give you a sense of how this data and information is being used, to make informed decisions. Because that's ultimately what it comes down to, is it should improve how we do our job. And we identify new ways, that different opportunities to actually do it better if we did have, this other nugget of information, let's say. I'm going to stop and I will go back to the slide, and I believe the last slide in my deck is going to be one where I'd say a little bit about our agency and where you can contact us. This is HRSA. That's how we pronounce it. And please go there if you have any interest in learning more about what we do. Certainly feel free to reach out to myself if you have follow-up questions about today's presentation or anything else. It's a pleasure to speak to you.
Hey, thanks, Joe. I think I can get started with the CMS portion of the presentation. Just share my screen here. Okay, go and just. Hey, thanks, Joe, and good afternoon, everyone again. So I think this whole COVID public health emergency was, sort of a wake-up call in terms of if you initially looked at the whole COVID situation across the country, it is a healthcare crisis. But if you look underneath day to day in terms of what we do, it really is a data management crisis as well, because you're always reacting after the fact and there's no predictiveness. You're never ahead of the curve. So I'll just give a quick intro into who CMS or what CMS is all about. We've probably been in the news more than we want to, but CMS really is the largest optive within HHS. And I personally always like to think we are the second H in the HHS, the health and human, or like to call it humane. Simply because, like Joe said, we really are dealing with the most vulnerable sections in society in terms of disabled people, older seniors, children on SCHIP, low income, insurance, as well as Medicaid itself. If you think about the dollar value of every dollar that is spent in this country on healthcare, 42% of it in some shape or the form is reflected in the CMS outlays. So it kind of gives you an idea, 42% and only growing, given where we are with, people getting older and things like that. So CMS itself, at this point, we impact lives of well over 150 million people through the different programs we cover. If you talk about Medicare itself, just the Part A and B, close to about 60 million people are directly enrolled in Medicare itself. So kind of gives you an idea of what CMS is all about. So I think Dave in his introduction had mentioned the word HIGLAS, and HIGLAS really is the accounting hub for all of CMS's spending outlays. I don't think I'd like to call it a system, but rather an ecosystem where different lines of business or functions exist cohesively, and we're able to track and report in terms of the financial outlays and things like that. So 4 of the most important things that CMS does: the Medicare fee-for-service, or the traditional Part A and B coverage, the Affordable Care Act, the healthcare exchanges, as it's called. That's another big piece of what we do here. The third thing is our internal operations, and that would include funding the Medicaid, the SCHIPs, which is Children's Healthcare. And then there are other ancillaries like the Medicare secondary pay, where CMS goes after other traditional forms of insurance to collect our monies. So when you talk about 1.5 trillion outlay every year, your immediate instinct is that's a lot of data. And with a lot of data comes, bigger the data, bigger the headache. And then the second saying that we have here is we are extremely rich when it comes to data, but extremely poor when it comes to information. And we are accountants at the heart of it, even though we do IT and other functions. But we really are bad storytellers when it comes to telling what is it that we exactly do and how it sort of all impacts the general population. So a few facts about the system itself. I think the biggest takeaway here, the 2 takeaways in my mind, if you read the recent cyber attacks and things like that, when you have that much data, big ocean, the goal is to keep the bad players out, as well as mine that data, as Joe said, to be effective in decision making. So recently, for example, if you see on the right-hand side, I'll put my cursor there. we were able to successfully cut over to our disaster recovery, which is our backup site, and operate out of there for 1 week and then come back to production. And I don't think there are many agencies in the civilian part of the federal world who have done that kind of a successful cutover. And then this 9 billion is important because when I go into what we exactly did with the COVID CAP program, I'm going to talk about how that money is going to come back, because our program, which is called CAP, is a little different from the PRF program. And as much as we've tried to help Joe and HRSA, because this is all Medicare data and we understand that data well, I must say that in terms of the storytelling aspects, the art of it, I can't thank Joe and his team enough, Alex and other people at HRSA. Uh, Without that, I don't think we could have been able to easily roll up some of this information to make sense. And we'll go through some of the samples of that. So a big shout out and thank you to Joe and team. So this is what happened when the CARES Act was passed last March. There were two programs, one that HRSA administered, the Provider Relief Fund that Joe spoke about. And then we had the second one, which was the Accelerated and Advanced program, or COVID Accelerated and Advanced. So CMS always had an Accelerated Advanced program, for local emergencies like hurricanes and regional outages and things like that. But, all of, I think in the last 5 years, we've spent about 100 million in such cases. When this hit, the basic idea was that a beneficiary should not be devoid of services because the provider went out of business. And our goal was to keep the providers in business and not get into financial difficulties because they either don't have patients or they have other issues going on around with the public health emergency. And the third thing is, this CAP program, 107 billion was issued as loans to providers to remain financially viable to providers and suppliers. The idea being that at some point that money would come back. So this is not a stimulus or grant money like the PRF that HRSA did, but it's all it is a loan with very sort of lenient terms. But the goal is to get that money back, because the third goal of the whole cap is if that money didn't come back, CMS did not get any special funding for the cap. We have used the trust funds, the Medicare High and Smart trust funds. So if that money didn't come back for whatever reason, that would have a huge impact in terms of the solvency of the trust fund. So that repayment angle, which is listed here, is very, very important. That our goal is not just to send the money out, but track it and ensure that everybody pays their dues back to keep the trust fund solvent. So that is what the CAP program was about. And Joe had an edge over us, HRSA. Their heavy investments upfront on some of these dashboards and tools like Tableau helped them out earlier on. For us, it wasn't an organic growth. It was very much a seismologic kind of change that the earthquake is happening, now get ready and react to it. So in terms of some of the highlights that he spoke about for agency collaboration, I think the biggest takeaway was we did not create any new systems or business processes, but extended what was already in our system in terms of existing processes. And that is the only reason, we are sort of came out alive out of all of this, because if we had to do things on the fly, we had like 2 weeks to go live and start making these payments. We would never have done that. So the biggest takeaway, I think, is that you should always leverage existing systems and standard business processes. Like Joe said, you've got to account, you've got to have the financial reporting, you've got to make sure you can pass the litmus test of an audit. And I think collaboration wise, I think having some of these existing data user agreements as well as understanding your data, I think was the biggest takeaway, because we had a very good handle. We really are data experts, not so much storytellers. That's where we lean heavily on what some of the work that Joe did, that 12-week program. We had a couple of our team members go there, spend time with them. And we really can't thank them or HRSA team enough, because without that kind of thing, we wouldn't have been able to stand up some of these dashboards and presentations. Because as an executive, they care less for the details. They really want the raw number, the top line number. And that's really what, this whole story is all about. So instead of just doing slide decks, I'll take a little deviation and show you what some of the work we did. Now, we are heavily invested as a shop in Oracle. We are an Oracle Federal Financial Certified, probably the largest healthcare transaction base in the federal world. If you saw that graph, we had like 5 million claims that come through every night. We've also invested heavily on Oracle's BI intelligence, which is the business intelligence. So we took it one step further and then paired in with what Joe had done, we sort of to tell the top line numbers, or the top end of this, we started telling these stories publicly and internal stakeholders as well, using Tableau. So really Tableau has come in and helped us fill that void, and a lot of this work was done internally within the agency. So a shout out to my teammates and other people within the agency who helped out. So we really couldn't bring in a contractor and wait for an award and things like that. We had to hit the ground running. So in terms of the program itself, this is how we monitored the money going out, which was half the story. The money coming back with the repayments really is a different challenge. And the idea was for we have different stakeholders here. We have our insurance folks, we have the centers of Medicare, we have all kinds of calls from FOIA requests and things like that. The goal really was to have the same set of data, but really present that data depending on who the audience is. So this is something that we present to an executive, which is very high level. Again, please bear in mind all the graphs and other things that I'm going to show you are only for illustration purposes. Don't pay too much attention to the real number. I don't want anybody walking away with that thinking it is the real thing. Um, so what we did at CMS was help HRSA to not only administer their program, but this is the end result of what we did, work with CDC, which was to display how the money went out, because the public wants to know, as well as the recipients and congressional inquiries, and everybody else wants to know who got the money, when they got the money, and things like that. So breaking two programs down with a common taxonomy for data was a huge challenge. But the end result of that is we actually have a crosswalk that's a public facing website that gives you a clear idea of how much went out against the PRF, and it's called the accelerated advance payment, or CAP. And it actually gives you a drill down into each provider by state and amounts and things like that. So the goal really was simple. The same 40, 45 data elements were tagged and brought into the warehouse. And we really display based on who is asking for that data. So instead of just giving this data to somebody, and then when data falls in the wrong hand, if you're not able to interpret the data, you get bad results. So instead of that, the step we said is, you ask us the presentation, you ask us the requirement, we know the data and we'll present it to you. So this is just one example of how there was an application process to get the money as part of that. So how providers went through, how they applied, we are able to actually dissect different metadata, different dimensions in terms of who the provider community is, how much they got by state. We are able to drill down. Again, at an executive level, they care less, but as we get into some of the analysts, they definitely want to look in. So I'll just pick up any state randomly. Let's take Louisiana. So we can then go into this and actually tell you how much the state of Louisiana overall got under the two programs, under which kind of fund, Part A, Part B, and then give you what kind of facility got money. And then we're able to drill down much further into who these healthcare providers were. So very detailed, start up, and then sort of a top-down approach to it. And then one of the things that we were asked to do is that whole analytical thing that Joe spoke about. We wanted our analysts to think beyond just reports, but also, does this data make sense? So, the old adage, follow the money kind of the situation. So we've used this as the money went out to map it to the active COVID cases that we had in the country. This was between March and July last year. And clearly you see the dark spots is where the money went, and that pretty much nicely sort of aligns to the blue is actually the cases, and the black is where the funds were sent. And you can drill down, and this is pretty fast in production as well, to each county in terms of where these healthcare facilities are and who is it that got the money. Obviously, I can't show you beyond this for privacy, but you get the idea in terms of who these people are and why the money was sent out. Definitely, it should correlate to active COVID cases that were there. And the goal here is to build like a baseball kind of index to get a profile on each of these providers, because sending the money is half the challenge. Getting the money is a whole different challenge. With the different waves and the way the pandemic has evolved, that's been a big struggle. So the repayment of the cap is probably as much important, and that's why a lot of the projections come into play. Is, can we project who are the people who may not pay us, who are the people who may be having financial issues in terms of bankruptcy, some of the other Medicare issues, they just get terminated, they get revoked. The whole program integrity that Joe spoke about, who are the bad actors? Will they not pay us back? There's a whole host of things that can happen out there. So then what we've done is, again, depending on who you are and how much data you want to see, really the executives like this dashboard. The nice thing is this is directly connected to our production warehouse or database, and it actually seamlessly updates depending on when we have the run, which is once a week. We have some of these dashboards even run daily. So we haven't moved the data, we're actually querying off live databases. And you can clearly see most of the money went out. Look, more than 102 billion was sent out between April and May last year. And then after that, we kind of stabled down to like 107. And the goal is to get that 107 back from a solvency perspective. So now, with Congress having passed the repayment terms last September, we have a clear idea of the repayment terms. We can collect 25 cents to every dollar that a provider got for the next 11 months. Then that bumps to 50 for 6 months. And then the eventual goal is, it should be fully sort of demanded at that point. I think there's like a 4% interest. So this really is where we spent a lot of time on the projection to build this model, and this is now up and running. So at any point in time, you can actually go in, trend, look, and these are all actuals, as well as play around with the projection methodology if you want a different way of looking at the numbers. So we have a very good handle on who's paying. And again, this is gross. This is just giving you a raw number. But believe me, behind the scenes is detailed down to each provider, each transaction, as to where it is in its life cycle. So this is just a flavor of some of the other stuff that has been done. Kind of gives you an idea of how we are trending, if there are any anomalies. We are regional based within Medicare, as you guys know, the whole jurisdiction based. So we have a concept of tracking by jurisdictions, and we have a good idea that the trend lines so far are working in our favor. I think about 32 billion of the money has come back, and we have about 74 billion or so to go. So again, if you look at some of the work that Joe has done, I'll be first to admit that we probably are very much in our infancy. But the whole idea is to leverage rather than try to do it from scratch. And that's really where this collaboration across the two agencies comes into play. We've relied heavily on some of the work that they have done to present the data, make it more palatable, and not get too much into the rungs of Medicare kind of specific terms and things like that. So different ways of looking at the data. We've worked with program integrity. We've worked with OAC, which is our actuaries office. We've worked with CM, the Centers of Medicare, in terms of some of the MAC work that they do. External stakeholders, Office of Legislation, Congressional, we can go down to districts in terms of who got what money, and then CDC itself in terms of posting some of this. So the cross-component factor in all of this is very important. Rather than them having to take our data and represent, we rather use the source and build it for them as we've gone. So different stakeholders who've got the same data, and we've been able to sort of present to it. And I think with that, I'll go back. So if you see some of the earlier work we did, this is what we had put up earlier. You see, again, let me make this a little bigger here. I have a couple of minutes left. So you'll clearly see the evolution, I guess, how we went about it. This is our work from last year. Let me just, yeah. Clearly, you see very sort of rudimentary way of seeing, very powerful, but as we have gone along, uh, this is the crosswalk that we had done. So you see clearly all the blues are the money going out on the cap, a crosswalk by state that can go down to the provider level against the two programs. And then as we come into this year, you clearly see the team, has picked up so much in terms of learning from HRSA, the program that Joe spoke about, where they really, want these analysts to think outside the box and not just scan these reports. And this is some of the work that has come out as a result. We're able to build that scorecard. I call it the baseball sort of analogy. We can basically give a very good idea of the stats of each provider or type of provider, whether it's geographic, whether it's kind of facility, provider type by each of these business lines. and go down and then tell you how they are doing, where the risks are, where the program integrity issues may be in terms of some of the risky providers and getting the money back or not getting the money back. I think we have about 10 minutes left. So Zach, at this point, I think I'm done with my presentation. Again, a big shout out to Joe and team at HRSA. And then I'd just like to conclude by thanking my management, Chris Martin, our group director, for having that vision to come in and invest not only the capital expenditure that's required to build these kind of tools, but also put a team away from their day jobs and say, you know what, these are investments that will pay off. So unfortunately, it wasn't organic growth. It wasn't there before the health crisis hit, but the health crisis really has helped us to sort of tune into that. And hopefully if there are next any kind of big challenge like this, I think we all are in a better shape because we've learned a lot over the last year.
Awesome. Thank you, Jay. Thank you, Joe. We really appreciate you speaking with us. We're going to begin the Q&A. We do have some questions from attendees. So let me get you those. Okay, Joe, this one is for you. During your presentation, somebody asked, what is the backend database?
Similar to what I think Jay said, we are an Oracle database as well.
Thank you. Another attendee asked how they can sign up for the 12-week program.
It's a great question. You know, let's be clear that this program that I refer to is a HRSA program, so you would need to be well, it's funny. We have CMS colleagues on it as well. So, but it's candidly, you know, it's an HHS. It's designed for HRSA and some of our partnering folks. So if they're within the agency, they could certainly reach out to me and I could forward them in the direction of our Center for Innovation. Our Center for Innovation is actually managing that training program.
All right, thank you, Joe. Another question for you, is there any connection between your IRMS and the FBIS in the department? Oh,
that's a great question. Think about them as having like a similar relationship where you know, certainly as Jay and Chris and his team would tell you, you know, you really don't want your accounting system to be pounded for reporting purposes, right? So you spin up and you stand up a separate arm or separate system and capability to generate reporting. So similar to what FBIS is what you referred to, similar to what that offers is a little bit what IRMS does as well. The difference for us is while we're bringing in similar accounting, you know, intake files from our UFMS system, the difference is we have a lot of other internal feeder systems that we're able to bring in and ingest. And so from a financial management perspective, we're able to see life before an obligation. You know what I mean? Like you're seeing it as it's working its way through a commitment process. You would never know that in an accounting system or an accounting extract. You only know it once it's out. So we kind of grab visibility a little bit earlier. And we also have some of the data sets that are coming in allow or assist us with our A123 internal control type testing and risk management type activity. So it's a little different than maybe what FBIS might do right now. Zach, I don't know if you're taking notes or if you.
No, I apologize. I am muted.
Okay.
That's my bad. Another attendee asked, how does your team approach data collection to ensure accuracy? For instance, if you have hundreds or thousands of grantees reporting data in their respective systems, how do you work to standardize data collection nationally?
I'll let Jay, because Jay, certainly Jay, why don't you, I mean, you're dealing with such bigger sets of data, and then I'd be glad to jump in after you.
Sure. I mean, that's a loaded question, but a great question from Chloe. So CMS over the years, if you remember, has invested a lot in the whole electronic health record system, exactly to address the bottleneck that you're talking about. For the cap, we really, we're very, very conservative when it comes to this. And what we did is all the data extracts that, were originated in terms of the applications as well as eligibility were all generated in our system and then forwarded to the, end units, precisely to avoid what you're talking about. So I exactly know what you're saying. And on the way back, we've done the same. So we do have Medicare contractors who work through the country. We've been using this system. HIGLAS have been very, very clear that you've got to use the standard reports and things like that for data collection. We do not rely on end units or provider kind of built reports and spreadsheets. So it's all coming either from the source system HIGLAS or being fed back into HIGLAS using those standard APIs, as you mentioned. Good question. Yeah.
Yeah, and I would say the only thing I'd say from our perspective, first of all, it's a very intelligent question. It's a great question, and it is a bit loaded because that's the crux of everything is the integrity and accuracy and validity of your data. We work with trusted authoritative sources of data as well. We consider them to be the source of truth in many times, and so we have the ability to fall back, so to speak, and compare and reconcile against it to ensure that we can repeatably and consistently kind of get back to that number exactly, or for most purposes, that's how we would do it.
Awesome, great answer. This one's just kind of a compliment. Joe and Jay, will you consider future presentations together? This was very informative.
Jay, listen, Jay's a hard guy to get. So, you need to start with Jay first. But yeah, we what I really enjoy, and that's why this was actually really, really a nice one, is as he would tell you, I mean, for many months, we worked very closely, and they were pretty rough times, for the country, and working virtually and remotely and continuously throughout the night really helps really kind of build some nice relationships. I'll just leave it at that. I consider them to be not just good colleagues. We got some friends there, and it's nice to have that.
Awesome. This is for either of you. A great approach on working on existing DUAs across agencies. How long did it take to revise existing DUAs? I see that as a challenge, setting it up without the current PHE.
Yeah, I mean, Joe, I can go. DUA, I put it in my slides because believe me, it's a nightmare otherwise, but it's surprising when there's a national emergency like this or an international one, how quick people, work. But again, that is a credit to our upper management. I'd like to shout out to our CFO, Megan Warstel, as well as John Tchaikovsky, who is our director in finance, and then Susan Moranes, Alex Huttinger, Joe at HRSA.
Yeah.
We just had one meeting where we sat down and said, guess what? We either sink or sail. And then, that was it. The management left it to us in terms of drafting all of this. We worked through our CISO, Conrad here, take it up the chain. Having an existing DUA helps because you modify what's required, and then there's so much of PII data involved, so it becomes more important how do you share it. We got to get in our program integrity guys because they have all kinds of law enforcement things going on. But I think being in a public health emergency, everybody pulled up their socks and says, yeah, let's do it. So I think we had ours in place, I think in a week or less than that, Joe, if I remember.
Yeah.
And even before that came, we were up and running in terms of the conversation, how to share it and things like that.
Yeah, you nailed it. I really have nothing else. I think Jay hit all the points there. Susan Monera's on the HRSA side, and Alex Huttinger, and we had other folks like our deputy chief operating officer. All these folks were Tina Cheatham. All these folks really, they just they kind of knocked down the barriers and made it a little bit easier for folks like Jay and I to kind of grind out some of the details. So that was kind of beautiful.
And I think the nice thing is the relation is in place. So Joe and I, Chris Martin, we've been sharing so many emails outside of CAP right now, working towards these things. So I think this is a wake-up call, but I think in a way it's good it happened because it really built those roads and bridges and says, you know what, we could leverage it for other things as well.
Yeah.
So that's, I guess, the nice thing in a bad time like that.
My apologies, I was muted again. How was the data interoperability handled between agencies?
So I think that goes back to the DUA that somebody had asked earlier, very similar to that. I think, again, big shout out to the executives because they had that one meeting where they met and set the rules. And pretty much after that, we've been using secure means to send the data across. We've used the NIH Share secure site. And that's really what's been the way we've been sharing some of this data, all of the data actually.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
And this person just wanted your general thoughts. What are some of the ways you ensure that data silos and common bureaucratic turf battles didn't impact data access and sharing during the public health emergency?
Yeah, I think great question, right? So in my mind, when I got a call and said you need to get involved with this last March, the biggest issue in my mind is it's a data management failure across the country. That's really what COVID was all about, right? So in terms of reacting to it, I think we have very good access, role-based access controls in terms of the data. The idea was to involve as many people as we could upfront. So that means actuaries, that means Center of Medicare, the PII, the law enforcement, the OGC, the General Counsel, make sure that all these, there's a saying in CMS, right? They say one CMS, many locations. We really had to do that upfront to make sure we are not, because we only look at it as technical people or accountants, right? But there's so much more to that data. I think that is the key to success. Involve as many diverse people who are involved, who know this data, who can use this data. And the other thing is we don't share the data. So that I want to be very clear, right? There's so many ideas being floated around data lakes and this and that. That's all good theoretically, right? But for you to understand the data as one lifeline, it's going to take your whole, one life is less, right? So we present and we build the data based on your requirements, but the central data remains with us. That's really the theme of this.
Thank you, Jay. Last question, data collection and literacy. How much do you emphasize on data cataloging?
Well, again, think about Zachary. What I would say to that is, when we're trying to create a rising tide, okay, and I'm not trying to put this in any kind of demeaning way whatsoever. We're trying to lift or raise the tide so all the boats will lift. The data cataloging and all that sort of, the data standards, all these big issues, these are essential kind of pillars of what we're operating. We're fortunate with our CDO and with our Center for Innovation having real strong, kind of leadership and buy-in within our bureaus and offices. Even within our IT shop, big time, with our security office gets it, our CTO and our CIO very actively involved. But what I would say from a data literacy perspective is, we're focused on getting to the point where if you are, there's an analytical aspect to your work, which job isn't these days, that you've got the fundamental skills to be bilingual with data. Okay, meaning you can have a data conversation. If you had to speak to a DBA because you just weren't sure you're getting the information you need, you could have that conversation. And so for us, we're getting to that point where I think it's a growing number. You walk into rooms and people get it, they can speak it. And the extension of that, or the kind of the pillars or foundations, I'd say, it's a very good question, has to do with the ability of how are we governed, how are we standards, what are the metadata, what are the catalogs, those are the things that still need to continue to evolve and mature. Not just here, but, you know, I think in most organizations.
Awesome. Thank you, Dave, Joe, Jay, for being with us this afternoon. I want to thank all of our participants who joined us today. We hope this webinar has been helpful for you and your organization. If you have any further questions or would like to request more information, please feel free to contact us via email. We also have follow-up coming out, and that should contain more information. Again, if you meet all of the requirements for the CPA credit, you will be receiving your certificate within 2 weeks. Thanks again, and have a good day, everyone.
Thanks, guys.